So here we are, back on a skull where we started. After we have completed the first classification of joints using the material that is used to make them, fibrous, cartilaginous, or synovial, now it's time for us to address the other alternate classification, which is functional. So by function we really consider ability of a joint to produce the movement, and this is something that will make the approach to this classification a little bit easier to understand. First category, first group of joints, and this is why the skull is in front of me, are joints that are producing practically no movement. Those joints are called the synarthrodial joints. There are many people who would debate, and I would agree to some extent with them. If there is still a bit of fibrous connective tissue left between the left and right side parietal bone, that fibrous tissue will be responding to my attempts to squeeze between left and right parietal bones. So I cannot deny that some movement would not happen. But in essence, it is not something that is substantial or something significant, and of course, as we go older, fibrous tissue will gradually disappear from inside the suture and the entire joint will become synostosis, which is connection between parietal bones, left and right, will be made by bone tissue. So after synarthrodial joints, we'll be talking about joints that are considered amphiarthrodial joints. Let's use one more time example of two vertebrae where we placed a little bit of yellow Play-Doh acting as intervertebral disc between the bodies of two adjoining vertebrae. Let's put it back together and let's try to zoom. So what we have here is a piece of fibrocartilage. And this piece of fibrocartilage is something that will help us understand that this joint has already been classified as the cartilaginous secondary joint. Or, if you forget what the name of a secondary cartilaginous joint is, it is symphysis. So what's happening? Because this is only a segment of the entire spine. This is fibrocartilaginous insert between vertebral bodies. It is really hard to believe that we're going to have any significant movement happening between two vertebrae, perhaps as much as I'm demonstrating, and it could be measured only by a couple of degrees. But we take into consideration that the spinal column is composed of 24 mobile vertebrae, and that a similar type of movement is going to happen between any two vertebrae of the spinal column, then we're ending up by seeing significant mobility of the entire spine. So this is a little bit tricky to understand that this is considered to be amphiarthrosis, so joint with a limited mobility, whereas when you take a look at the entire spine, that kind of joint clearly is something that produces very significant movement, but it really affects the entire spinal column. Finally, we're arriving at a group of joints that are called diarthrodial joints or diarthroses. Those joints are offering the most significant range of motion, and practically I want to address that one does not attempt to correlate between structural and a functional classification. You would see that most synovial joints are really joints that are diarthrodial with the greatest freedom of movement, but here and there we will find some exceptions, and because of those exceptions it's not fair to say that all diarthrodial joints are synovial joints or vice versa. So what we're using to illustrate here is the right-sided shoulder joint, which is type ball and socket. This is the most interesting type of joint because the movement could be performed in a variety of different directions. So for the diarthrodial joints, like glenohumeral joint is, obviously movement is not going to be significantly limited by a physique of bones that are participating in the buildup of a joint and other associated structures that will be used to build proper environment within which joint will function properly within its full range of motion is something that could be addressed while studying joints individually. For example, we will take a look very quickly here at the scapula and identify this area, the glenoid cavity, as the articular surface that scapula offers for glenohumeral joint. In a real life, the glenoid cavity will be circumscribed by additional rim of fibrocartilage called the glenoid labrum. So that will not only increase the size of a glenoid cavity, it will also increase its depth. So this joint will be able to operate much better and of course will gain much more stability.